May we learn together in hope and joy. Please be seated. I want to warn you that this morning we are going to start our conversation and end our conversation with a topic that makes many Episcopalians very uncomfortable. Imagine all of the things that might be running through your mind right now. I'm not going to ask you to blurt them out, but that might be fun. That might be entertaining. What I want to talk about just for a little bit and then circle back to it is the topic of evangelism. We don't like that word in the Episcopal Church for lots of reasons. I think for some of us, the idea of evangelizing feels rude. To go up to someone and say, "You're wrong, I'm right. Now let me tell you how you can be right," feels not like something that polite human beings would do. Or maybe it's because we've had experiences or heard about forms of evangelism that are not the healthiest forms. And we're not going to talk about any groups by names, but I remember as a child, my dear mother, bless her heart, looked out the window, and I gasped, went and locked the door, and then came and found the children and said, "If you hear the doorbell ring, don't you dare answer the door." Or maybe on the opposite token, coming home from school one day to find those two people in nice suits sitting in the sitting room with my father discussing the Greek translation of the first chapter of the Gospel of John, and hearing from my mother, "They've been here for an hour. They said no thank you to the coffee." That's the experience. And we look at that and we say, that's not great. But I bring it up because we have in our gospel reading one of the first examples of Christian evangelists. And I wish truly that I could tell you her name, but we are not told her name. As is often the case in the scriptures, women go unnamed. Zacchaeus, we know his name, but the ladies get unnamed. But nonetheless, she, having had an interaction with Jesus at the well, goes and shares the truth that she has heard and brings people to hear Jesus. And that is evangelism. And she did that thing that is difficult with some additional barriers in her culture. And I'd like to think about those for a moment and how we erect those same kinds of barriers in our culture, and then we will circle back to see how that can help us to hear the voice of God, which is at the heart of evangelism. When I think about this story, I think about, oddly enough, the steeplechase. Are you familiar with the steeplechase? The steeplechase, the steeplechase, the steeplechase, the steeplechase up on your, yeah. You're running, I don't know, 60,000 miles. I don't know. How long do you run? You run a very long time, right? And then after having run a long time, they say, "Oh, here's a wall to jump over. And if the wall to jump over isn't enough, we're going to have you jump over a wall and land in a pond and then keep running for a long distance." You know, running is hard enough. We don't need hurdles and barriers and ponds to work through. Evangelism is hard enough without these barriers that we erect and that have been erected before us. The first barrier, and we sort of nodded at this already, is that the woman at the well was a woman. That was a trick. That was a dirty, rotten trick. Okay, so biblical studies, we don't make things complicated. The woman at the well is a woman at the well. The Samaritan woman is a woman who is a Samaritan. Yet we're not going to talk about the Samaritan part. We're only going to talk about the woman part. In the first century, in Samaria and in Jewish law, women were little better than property. And that's not a good thing. And we're not going to maybe look down our noses too much at a culture that was 2,000 years ago. But women were not allowed to testify in court. Their testimony was invalid. A woman who had a 13-year-old son who had been bar mitzvahed, she could not testify, but that 13-year-old child, he could. And it wouldn't matter if there was an event that occurred that 15 women saw and one man heard about. The one man who heard about it could testify. The 15 women could not. And that legal code got projected into all sorts of other scenarios, informal, in which the voice and opinion of a woman was considered less than worthless. That is a reality that this woman faced. And yet, interestingly enough, if you pay very careful attention to that very lengthy gospel reading, the reason that John tells us that these women came to hear Jesus was because of her testimony. That particular word that would be used in a court proceeding that a woman could not be allowed to give, she gave. And so we should pause for a moment and applaud her. Not literally, we don't do that in the Episcopal Church. If we were somewhere else, maybe we would. But applaud her for claiming her humanity, her autonomy, her full value. And she spoke that truth, and they listened. If we want to hear the voice of God, or if we want to hear, to follow this story a little more closely, the voice of Christ, it would do us well to look for those voices that for many different reasons we say are less important, less valuable, less significant, and foster, perpetuate, or build a culture in which those voices are on equal plane. Because when every voice is valued, and every voice is heard, and every voice is considered equally, that, when we listen carefully, is when we start to hear the voice of God. But this woman not only had the barrier of being a woman and of being a Samaritan, which I could have talked about, but I'm not going to, she was also an outcast. Jesus meets her at the well at noon. I don't know how many of you have ever been in the Middle East at noon. Let me tell you, you don't want to be outside. It's miserable. I was told before going over there that it's a dry heat. And I told that person upon returning, yeah, turn on the oven, stick your head in it, it's a dry heat. You don't want to be out there. There was no good reason to be out there. In the culture, they didn't go to the well at noon, they went early in the morning or late at night. And it was often a very social occasion. The ladies got together, they went to the well in the cool of the morning, they collected the water, they carried those heavy things back, and they socialized as they did it. It's how they got to see each other. It's how they got to catch up. It's how they got to share their lives with each other. And for some reason, we are not told why, this woman is not part of that group. Perhaps they kicked her out. Perhaps she chose not to be a part. But for one reason or another, she's not part of the in crowd. And so she goes at noon. And if you were to hear this story being told by many preachers, not by me, nor by you, Father Earl, but by others who get things wrong, we, of course, don't do that, you would hear that the reason that she's ostracized is because she is a sinful woman. As Jesus points out, she has had 5 husbands, and the man that she's with now is not her husband. And many, if not most, in the history of Christianity have said, there's the reason, because she is a sinful woman. And I would say to those commentators, you are wrong. Because you're sinful, by the way. Because that misunderstands the culture of the first century. This is going to sound a little bit like a lecture. Forgive me for that. But in the first century, women didn't have the right to testify. They surely did not have the right to divorce their husbands. The right of divorce was with only one partner in that marriage, and that was the man. So when Jesus says, you have been married 5 times. What he's not doing is shaking his finger at her and saying, shame on you. What he's saying is that I see the trauma you have experienced. I see the wrong that has been done to you. What has happened in your life should not happen to anyone, and I see it. By the way, when it says that she was with a man that wasn't her husband, that's nothing illicit. That was just the culture. If you were divorced, you went back to a man of your family. This man, unnamed as he is, could have been her father, her brother, her cousin, her uncle, her nephew. Nothing illicit there, just the sad reality that this woman had been kicked, tossed aside, considered rubbish in her life. And Jesus sees that and still listens to her, still loves her, still offers her living water. Now, I'm going to say something, and it may get me in trouble. And so I'm going to ask that our verger just wield her verge if anyone comes at me after the service. But we might look at her and say that maybe, just maybe, she had a small part in the 5 divorces. Because what we see in this story is a woman who is willing to argue about religion with a rabbi. This is a woman who has her own opinion and is unafraid of expressing that opinion. Now, I would look at that, and hopefully you would look at that and say that that is a good thing, yes? But first century men would not. You have your own opinion? You're willing to disagree with me? That would get you in trouble. And so there's no surprise that this woman who owned her own truth, who stood up for what she believed, who shared what she thought in the face of whomever, because she held on to it, ran into trouble. And so this woman, who goes and shares the truth of Jesus with all of these people, is probably the last woman that most of the men would have ever wanted to go to for her opinion, because probably they had heard it plenty enough. We have people like that in our lives, yes? We have people like that in our families that when they start to opine, you can hear the groans, you can see the eyes rolling, and you're like, oh, Uncle so-and-so. Yes, please, go on. And here's the hard thing that I think is true. If we want to hear the voice of God, we are going to have to listen to the people we don't want to listen to. There are a lot of people in this world, in this country, in this community, whose opinion I am utterly uninterested in hearing. I just don't want to hear it. I know what you're going to say, I don't want to hear it. But what I think this story reminds us is that if we want to hear the voice of God, sometimes we're going to have to listen to the people we don't want to listen to, because there's probably something true there. And what I love about this woman is that she goes and and we're going to get back to that E word, evangelizes. But she evangelizes not by getting in someone's face and saying, I'm right and you're wrong. She comes to them and says, he can't be the Messiah, can he? She simply asks a question. She speaks to the journey that she is on and suggests to these people that perhaps for a season their journey might align with hers and they might walk together. I would suggest that that might be a little healthier, a little better way of thinking about what evangelism is all about. Because we're all on a journey. Yes, we're all on a journey. And sometimes our journeys come together, and sometimes our journeys come apart, and sometimes our journeys come together and that's a good thing, and sometimes our journeys come together and that's not a good thing. I would suggest to you that the evangelism that the woman at the well teaches us is to say, come journey with me for a time, and maybe, just maybe, we might learn something together. If you listen to me, and I listen to you, and together we listen to God, then our journey, I think, will be fruitful and headed in the right direction. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.